Hello and welcome to our July Coffee with interview. Today I'm chatting with David Cooke, who is a Senior Manager with Camcare. Welcome, David.
Thanks, Sharon. Lovely to be here.
So, of course, we're doing a coffee with. I have my little coffee, my morning coffee with, or tea. Actually, I'm a tea person, cup with me. Are you a coffee or a tea person, David?
I'm neither tea or coffee. Usually it's just water when I'm at the office, but if it's a hot drink, it's going to be a hot chocolate.
Oh, very nice. One of my favourites as well, but sometimes a bit tricky to get a really good one, I think.
That is true, but it's got to have the marshmallows.
Yes, absolutely. So before we begin, I would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land from which we're both Zooming from today and pay our respects to the elders past, present and emerging, and also acknowledge that this land was never ceded. Perhaps for me, I'm coming from the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation. Whereabouts are you Zooming from today, David?
Same with me. I'm in Camberwell at the office at Camcare, and that's on the land of the Wurundjeri people as well.
Fantastic. So perhaps you could tell me a little bit more initially, David, about Camcare. I know it's a bit of a smaller organisation. Perhaps I'm wrong about that, but maybe something that not everyone is familiar with what you do and your role in the community.
Sure. So Camcare is, as you say, a small community organisation. We've been around for 42, 43 years. We're a non-denominational community organisation that we sort of started as information and referral and supporting the vulnerable members of the community in Camberwell and the city of Boroondara, and have expanded over time and expanded our programs over time. When I started with Camcare 3.5 years ago, I was the 23rd paid employee, and we had around 120 volunteers as well. So a big part of Camcare is our volunteer group and the work that the volunteers do, and we wouldn't be able to do what we do without them. At the moment, we provide information, referral, emergency relief, emergency food and toiletries. And the programs that I provide or manage the counselling and case management services, integrated family services, and we have a program, outreach parent support program for new parents, new mums who are at risk of postnatal depression. So they're the programs that we run within Camcare, and predominantly we support the city of Boroondara. We're funded by City of Boroondara for a number of our programs. But 3 years ago, we also merged with Access Health and Community. So we are a part of a much broader organisation now. We retain the Camcare brand, as you can see up above me, but we are a part of Access Health and Community, and obviously they provide a whole range of medical, dental, allied health, mental health programs across cities of Yarra, Manningham and Boroondara predominantly, although they're growing as well and have moved out into broader in the inner east and also the outer east with some of our mental health programs. And my role is Senior Manager at Camcare, overseeing all the clinical services.
Wow, fantastic. An incredibly important role, and the work of Camcare incredibly important in recent times. I would think that you've probably been very busy. How have you had to adapt or change the way that you're working during our experience of COVID?
As with everyone, there was that immediate need to switch from face-to-face for a number of services to telehealth, to Zoom, to MS Teams, those sort of programs. So all our counselling and support programs immediately switched to this telehealth video format. But in other parts of our organisation, we haven't changed a great deal. So we're still open face-to-face for drop-ins for people who have emergency relief requirements, and actually the number of people have or clients that need emergency relief and need um, support in that way have grown during COVID, because there's a whole bunch of people out there that previously had never used services such as Camcare, and all of a sudden found themselves without a job or not being paid. And so on a Thursday we have a fresh food market where the public can come and collect fresh fruit and vegetables, which are donated by local organisations, and also Second Bite and other bigger organisations like that. And over the period of COVID, the numbers that have come to that have doubled. So there's a lot more need in the community due to people losing their jobs, and also other groups within the community that have really struggled or not been funded in other ways. So international students obviously have grown in terms of their need, the lack of support that they've received. We've also found that a number of our clients weren't able to come into the office anymore due to their age or their vulnerability, health vulnerability, or fear, anxiety around public transport and things like that. So we also started to do some deliveries of some of our food deliveries and things like that for those particularly vulnerable people. So yeah, there's some areas that have stayed similar. We've always been open and always had people walking in, but also we've switched in some of our areas to be more COVID safe and provide a variety of service options for people that may not be able to get out of the house, or it's not safe for them to come into the office.
Such an important and vital service in the community. Yeah. So you mentioned there about your emergency relief and food relief services, and how the demand has probably doubled. What have you seen in terms of your own area of work, and what the impacts of isolation and the varying restrictions that we've had? What have the impacts been?
It's impacted a lot of people in a lot of different ways, and I think there's some positives out of that. But first of all, isolation, those that were already isolated, it's almost allowed the rest of us to understand what they may be feeling. People who prior to COVID were isolated or anxious or struggling to get out of the house, and what that meant for them in terms of not being able to interact with others or not feeling a part of the community. I think COVID has potentially given a range of us an experience of what that's like. When we were locked in our homes and not being able to connect with people, some of us found that really challenging and a new experience. For a social person, the lockdown in Melbourne was really, really tough. And I guess what we're finding is, and what I hope is, that allows the broader population to have some empathy for the vulnerable members of our community that are isolated or feeling socially isolated or socially disconnected. And we found that during this period, we have received a lot of donations from a lot of different people, both food, masks, things like that. That's increased as well. So I have a feeling it is having a positive impact in the community. It is allowing people to feel that empathy and experience what others are experiencing. Other areas, it is challenging. It has increased the anxiety level especially for older Victorians or older people in our catchment, because this was almost a targeted pandemic for older people, or that's how the media portrayed it, at least initially. So there was a lot of anxiety there. It created a lot of our volunteers at Camcare were 70 plus prior to the pandemic, and unfortunately they weren't able to come into work and have that connection with the community that they used to have, which impacted us and what our service delivery looked like, but also impacted the individuals who found the sense of community at Camcare. Coming to Camcare a day a week or a couple of days a week to do that volunteer work really meant a lot for our volunteers, and so it was a real struggle for them not to be able to come in. So we needed to maintain some connection with our people, our volunteers, during the pandemic. So continue to have meetings and online sort of hubs and seek their support and expertise in what they used to provide in person. We'd still seek that out from them in this sort of format to try and keep them connected. So yeah, lots of impacts, some positive, probably a lot more negative and challenging for us all.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it is great to think about the positive aspects of some of those impacts, but you know, in terms of the negatives and I suppose the ways that you've had to change how you're doing business, do you think some of those changes will continue on into the future when, you know, maybe we get to some sort of normality again, or, you know, I don't know if that's possible, but yeah, what do you think how will Camcare continue to do business a bit differently in the future?
I think the ability for us all, both staff, professionals and clients, members of the public, to use Zoom, to use MS Teams has provided another option for providing support when needed. Ideally, we still want to have the face-to-face connection with our clients. That personal connection, both in a counselling setting, in the community barbecues that we hold at Camcare, they're really important. But there are situations where it's hard for people to get out of the house, whether it's COVID or not. And so I think we have other options now that people are able to connect via this method more easily, more naturally than it used to be. For example, in our parent outreach support program for women with postnatal depression who are struggling day by day with their kids not sleeping or not feeding properly or whatever, rather than catching up with them once a week now in a face-to-face at their home, potentially we can catch up every second day via video and have still that face-to-face once a week. That sort of approach provides some flexibility and some connection that potentially was more challenging previously. So hopefully that will continue.
Just personally though, David, you know, we've just come through another round of restrictions in Melbourne while still experiencing them to some extent. Is there anything that you have secretly enjoyed about the lockdowns that we've had here?
During the first big lockdown, I went from obviously working in the office all the time to 1 week on the office and 1 week at home, and that worked for me. It allowed me the best of both worlds, because obviously Camcare and Access are essential services. We needed to remain open, and we needed a manager on site. So my manager, Jane Broadhead, and myself would work week about. So it was good to come into the office 1 week, connect with colleagues and what was going on, but then the next week to be able to be at home in my tracky dacks. A better work-life balance, I guess. Working from home, potentially I could do cooking, like cook a casserole all day and it was in the oven and I was at home working still. Things like that allowed more flexibility and more connection with home, which was a benefit. So I think I had the best of both worlds.
Yeah, maybe that's something else that we will benefit from in the future, be able to continue to some extent. And what about in terms of our travel and border restrictions, which have been on and off, you know, within domestic travel spaces? But is there anywhere that you are really keen to travel back to or to travel to for the first time once all of those restrictions ease?
I love traveling. I'm a big traveler. During the 1990s, I spent probably only a year and a half in Australia. I lived in a number of different countries overseas. So I lived in the States, I lived in New Zealand, I lived in England, I lived in Spain. So I love travel. So that's probably the hardest thing of lockdown, is the inability to get outside of 5 kilometres from my place. And last year during the big lockdown, I had a 50th birthday during lockdown.
Congratulations, but yeah.
It wasn't the birthday that I was expecting to have in terms of parties and travel and things like that. So I was planning to travel to Africa on an African safari, which I was really looking forward to. But alas, the furthest I got to wildlife was going to my local Woolies on the day. So yes, I'd like to be able to get over to Africa and do that safari at some point. But I guess a more immediate thing is I'd like to be on a beach somewhere that's sunny and warm, and I can snorkel and swim and surf and sit under a palm tree. That's my immediate desire when we get the opportunity to do so.
Yeah, that sounds like a very sensible approach to survive another Melbourne winter. So hopefully that will be possible again soon.
Hope so. Yeah.
Well, David, I'd really like to thank you today for your time and sharing with us just a bit more about what Camcare does and your role at Camcare, and also sharing some of those impacts on our local community. You know, some really valuable insights for us to hear. So thank you. Enjoy your next hot chocolate, and we'll talk again soon.
Thanks, Sharon.